Rambo Last Blood is the latest and quite possibly the last outing of John Rambo, one of Sylvester Stallone's most famous characters. The actor's been in a bit of a rut lately, even taking his standard action movie stuff into account. You probably haven't even heard of movies like Backtrace or Escape Plan 2 and 3, because this is the kind of direct-to-DVD crap that Stallone is doing nowadays. And every couple of years, we get a new Rocky film or a new Rambo film so Stallone can remind us that he's still around. And just over 10 years after the release of Rambo 4, we now have Last Blood. This one goes down the Taken route with the story. It's quite a bizarre departure from Rambo's usual adventures, where he goes into war-torn territories and engages in brutal showdowns with entire armies. But in this one, he's a cowboy now. Cowboy hat and everything, living on a ranch with a young Mexican woman and her grandmother. The young girl's father left the family and went to Mexico when she was young, and a friend of hers has recently found out where the father lives now. In order to receive some answers as to why he suddenly left, against the wishes of Rambo, she plans to secretly travel to Mexico and find her dad. But during the process gets kidnapped by Mexican pimp kingpins who torture her and put her out to work, along with a whole lot of other girls. It's up to John Rambo to head down to Mexico and bring the girl back safe and sound. It feels like what an R-rated Taken film would be like, in addition to all the violence, like one hilariously gratuitous part where Rambo literally pulls out someone's beating heart. Even the treatment of the young girl herself is far more darker than what we might imagine. Usually, for example, the girl in these kind of movies is threatened with violence and the hero bursts in at the nick of time. But in this movie, she actually gets raped and drugged repeatedly, and for most of that time, Rambo is unconscious from getting the shit kicked out of him after he makes the dumbest plan ever of simply walking up to about 50 bad guys and demanding the girl back. Like I said, the kidnapped Mexican chick isn't really a storyline that justifies pulling the Rambo character out of the top drawer. There surely was a more epic storyline the filmmakers could have gone for. The whole thing about rescuing the naive young girl from foreign baddies has been done to death since the wake of Taken, and when you pair it up with the cliches of the Mexican cartel, you end up with a pretty generic cannon fodder of a storyline. Rambo also seems different in this one. It doesn't really feel like Rambo. This is the only film, for example, where he doesn't have long hair, where he doesn't wear the famous head thing, where he doesn't take his shirt off. He swears in this one, which was quite uncharacteristic of him. And like I already mentioned, there's the cowboy thing with riding horses around the barn. I guess it makes sense in a way though, as Rambo went home in the last movie. At the end he was supposed to be finally somewhat at peace, so it makes sense that this film has a Rambo that does not resemble the old one in many ways, and not least because of Stallone's plastic surgery. Rambo Last Blood has a remarkable knack for skipping past all of the bullshit when it comes to cliches of films like this. It's almost like the movie knows, you know, what's going to happen, so it doesn't even bother sometimes. Like there's a part where Rambo kills a guy who's really close to the main baddie in Mexico, and then he goes back to his ranch home. Instead of there being a scene where the bad guy grieves and goes, "I'm gonna get you if it's the last thing I do," we just get him seeing the body, and the next scene is a montage of Rambo setting up his R-rated Home Alone starter pack and the baddies driving to his house. This method of editing gives this film, the shortest ever Rambo movie by the way, an even quicker pace, but often it works against it. Like in the final action scene, there's only really 2 action scenes in the film as well. But in the last one, Rambo has set all these booby traps underground his house, and the bad guys are all running into them, running through the tunnel as he takes them out one by one. The way this scene is edited is almost completely without any form of respite or downtime. It's just Rambo teleporting all over the tunnel, blowing people's heads off and stabbing them in the cock. It's just one after the other, like they filmed about 20 death scenes with the intention to choose which 5 or 6 they'd put in the film, and then they just shoved all of them in there. It felt like a compilation of an action film, a montage, rather than an actual action scene. It was so strange. It was like they were trying to hurry up and finish the movie as quick as possible, which is a shame because some of those kills in the climax were really good. And with tension and build-up, they could have had more impact. But by the time the film is done, you don't really remember many of the specific individual kills. Compare that to the glorious climax of the last movie, a film which I wasn't really much of a fan of anyway. But the final shootout with Rambo on that mountain gun was the stuff of action movie fans' wet dreams. It was the pinnacle, the apex of Rambo on screen. And then to think that Stallone has followed that up with a relatively flaccid and disjointed action film in Last Blood is disappointing. And with regards to what happens in the movie, Last Blood doesn't really have any business being a Rambo film. As the creator of Rambo, David Morrell, put it, the main character's name could be John Smith and the film wouldn't change. In fact, I would have probably liked the movie better if it wasn't a Rambo film and just another Stallone action vehicle. That way it wouldn't be chained to the weight and public consciousness of the previous films. A lack of references to events in previous films also makes this movie stick out when looking at all of the Rambo films together. It's like the bootleg Asylum fake sequel of the series. You hear this phrase a lot these days, whenever someone's trying to justify liking a crap film. But Rambo Last Blood really is a fun, dumb action film. It is really dumb, but I'm not going to sit here and lie by saying I didn't enjoy it. I did have fun watching the gruff Stallone walking around Mexico like he's a private detective in a neo-noir. He did have an edge to him in this film and was fun to watch. He came off as genuinely hard-boiled, as opposed to the danger of looking like a greasy old man desperately trying to cling on to past glories. I thought that the first half was a lot stronger than the second, because that's where a lot of the dumb stuff happens, and funnily enough, crazy for a Rambo film. But it was the action itself which I was a bit disappointed with the final showdown being a series of quick, gory kills that seemed like they belong in a Friday the 13th slasher flick. The film does touch upon some interesting stuff. You get the sense that there is an intelligent film hiding behind all the blood and guts. There was one part, for example, where Rambo bursts into a brothel and beats the crap out of the pimps and tells the girls to get out and run, but they refuse, saying they can't. It was an interesting look at the hopelessness of the situation these poor girls were in, that in real life you just can't charge in and save the day. It doesn't work like that. Where are these girls going to go? If they escape and have no subsequent help, they'll be caught and punished for their actions. And it was like Rambo Last Blood was addressing that. Ultimately, my feelings on Last Blood are mixed. I think it's a decent, gory action film, but doesn't work as a Rambo film. Had it been an original movie with no ties to the Rambo franchise, I honestly think I would be praising it for being a bloody, hard-hitting, R-rated action movie. But when you consider this is probably the last Rambo film, it's a little sad, really, that a series that gives you some genuine thoughts to chew on, even if it has a reputation and has been flanderized as a dumb action movie series, has its first genuinely dumb action entry. The first one is genuinely a great drama about PTSD and the treatment of Vietnam War veterans that just happens to have some action in it because the main character has issues and lashes out violently. The second one was the one that started the dumb action that the series is known for, but still has some interesting things to say about prisoners of war who were left behind on their own after the Americans pulled out. The third is really interesting, what with Rambo teaming up with people who decades later might have actually morphed into the Taliban. It's quite fascinating from a historical point of view with regards to who America sees as the enemy at any given point in time in history. The fourth gave us a glimpse into a war most in the West don't know about, and was a more personal film for Rambo, one that finally gave him an ending. I cannot think of what this one adds to the series, except launching Rambo back into the sense of isolation and frustration that he had been fighting his whole life. Also, he's a whole lot stupider in this one. Rambo Last Blood is a silly little film, fun and engaging at times but really stupid at others. A nice action film but a poor Rambo one. I give it a 5 out of 10.